Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Department Q Episode 1, which is a Netflix show. Well, I guess I'll start spoiler-free a little bit since it's an Episode 1. This is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Born Now for making the pick. So I had no idea what this was going into it. It was picked. I didn't really look into it too much. The title implied some kind of investigative department, but that was about it. I honestly didn't know if this was going to be like a sci-fi show with like supernatural cases that they were looking into, and it's not. It's more based in the real world. I also didn't know that it was set in Scotland, which I would maybe guess that that's part of the reason why it was picked for me, aside from obviously being liked by Born Now. But it's basically the premise is effectively that a disgruntled cop in Scotland, a detective, is given a new department to look into unsolved cases. The reason given for this is that it's kind of like good for public perception when an old case is finally solved. It's kind of almost like commenting on this idea of people being into true crime and like people following podcasts and then solving things years later. It feels like they're trying to bank on that for public points, effectively. And that's kind of like, and we don't actually get to the setup of that until like halfway through the episode, but that's the setup of the show. That's the kind of the overall thing, what we're doing. And by the end of the first episode, there is a kind of hook to try and make you excited for the rest of the series, which I actually, on the run up to the end of the episode, because this episode is just over an hour long, at least including the credits, and maybe a little bit less once you chop them off. But I was a little. The one concern I had going in is that Netflix shows sometimes are very, very poorly paced because they don't structure and try and keep your interest in the same way that a TV show is supposed to. They just kind of have a big story that's dragged out and they chop it up into little pieces, and they don't really care about the episodic structure and hook of each episode. And I was actually thinking about 45 minutes or so into this, and up until that point, I had been somewhat enjoying the introductions to the characters and kind of some of the things that it was setting up. I was enjoying some of the material, but I was starting to worry that the episode was still going, and I didn't really feel like we were building to a hook. I didn't really feel like we were building to that end of episode 1. This is why you need to come back for more. And the funny thing is I actually kind of guessed what the hook was, like maybe 30 seconds before they did it. Like it just kind of clicked in my brain what they might be pulling here by the end. So, because I don't want to call it a twist per se, but there's a little thing at the end that kind of like says, okay, that's what this show is now, and that that's what this season is. So yeah, overall, I thought it was quite a good first episode. Like I say, maybe I was a little concerned in the back half that maybe the pacing was going to feel a little bit wonky. To be honest, though, they did kind of round it up nicely for the last couple of minutes where it felt like, okay, you've made kind of your big point here by the end. And it definitely takes its time setting up the premise because, you know, the first like chunk of the episode is setting up character. It's setting up the backstory of our main character, who's one of the few characters in the show who isn't Scottish. The main character is played by Matthew Good. He plays an inspector named Carl. Carl, what was his name? Mark. I don't remember saying Mark at any point. You'd think I'd hear his last name more because he's an Inspector Mark, but no, they just call him Carl. But he is involved in basically a violent incident where he is injured and other police end up dead. Very sudden and surprisingly, as the opening scene's kind of stark and caught my attention. It was a good, head grabbing kind of scene. But he is kind of back on the job after some time away for being injured, and he obviously wants to solve the crime that he was involved in, that he was a victim of, but ends up with this other department under his belt. And then, we set up some other characters. We set up the other characters that may be working with him at the police station. His boss, who's a Scottish actress I've seen in a few things. What's funny, actually, the most distracting thing about this episode is that when the boss of the police station, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly what rank she is referred to as having in this. I'm because the funny thing is I watch so many American shows that oh god, it doesn't actually give me a rank in or IMDb credit. That's annoying. But her name's Moira Jacobson's the character name, played by Kate Dickie. She it has an interview or a sit down with, you know, some big wigs, right, from the head office, who come in and talk to her about her or the number of solved cases and how poor the numbers are, and like there's going to grill her out, and this is the setup for what Department Q is going to be, right? That's not why it has that name. The name's actually just because of like what it is, what the room he happens to get is called down in the basement area. But the actor, one of the actors, there's two guys here, and one of the actors who's telling her all this and like informing her of like starting this department and giving her extra budget and whatnot, he's an actor I recognised very quickly because he was on a couple of comedy shows that were very popular in Scotland, called Chewing the Fat and Still a Game. And it was almost like distracting to the point where I'm like, I have never seen this man not be in something where he's a very silly character. So it was very difficult. Imagine, it's kind of like watching like something that Leslie Nielsen was serious in before he did the Naked Gun stuff and Airplane and stuff like that, where it's actually very hard if you're used to him from those comedy roles to take him seriously when he's trying to be a dramatic actor. And not that this is like a super dramatic role, but he's meant to be in a position of authority. He's meant to be in here and giving out orders and acting like he's in charge. And it felt really weird because I'm so used to him being a very different type of actor. And obviously he's a bit older now as well, which, but even still, he was instantly recognizable. So yeah, so that's like one side of the show is setting up this police stuff with Carl and some supporting characters for that. And then the other side of the show is we're following a solicitor, which if you're an American watching this and you're not familiar with that term, that's just lawyer in British speak, basically. And she is on a big case. She's trying to put someone away, but the kind of undercurrent of episode 1 is that she is starting to be harassed via text and things like that. Someone, belittling her, threatening her, that kind of thing. And there's more that gets developed with that as the episode goes on as well. So that's kind of like what the focus of this, it's just kind of those two separate things, and then the setting up of Department Q itself, and then we get to kind of a hook at the end to kind of keep you on board. So, yeah, also, I guess the other big name, relatively speaking, that's in this is Kelly MacDonald, who is like a therapist character. She's only in one scene in this first episode, but I suspect she's going to be around more often. Whether that's just because we get the main character going to therapy every episode, or because she somehow gets more involved, I don't know. But she's a relatively well-known Scottish actress, so not surprised to see her in here. And yeah, a lot of the supporting roles are Scottish. I did say that Carl was the one non-Scottish character. That's actually not true. Akram is also a character, and he's definitely not Scottish originally. I think the reason why I said that, though, is because Carl is English, and that feels more worth pointing out. Obviously, Akram's not Scottish. No one's going to assume he's Scottish, but I feel the need to tell the Americans that Carl is not Scottish. Do not assume that. No one's mistaken the guy from Syria as being Scottish. So anyway, he's there, and he's kind of like, he only really comes into it properly in the back half of the episode. He's kind of teased early on, but he wants a job basically at the police department. Anyway, so I do think it's a pretty solid first episode. It's maybe like a little long, like maybe could have been trimmed by like 5 minutes just by a bit of nip and tucking here and there. It's not even like there's some big stuff that isn't necessary. For example, like Carl at one point goes home and we see he's got like a roommate and he's got like a teenage son. And honestly, I'm sure they'll come up later. I'm sure they'll be relevant in some fashion in a future episode. But to be honest, it felt like they were only in this first episode because they felt they had to do it in the first episode, not because it's actually important to know any of that in this particular story. I'm sure, yes, it will be important that he has a teenage son down the line, but it's almost like we could have saved like 2 minutes there by just not doing the scene where he goes home and yells at his son for a bit. Like it felt like extraneous almost to a point. But it's a minor quibble, all things considered. I think that the hook by the end is fairly good. Again, it's not necessarily super surprising. I think most people could probably guess what it's about to be, either on the run up to it or whatever. I think they kind of mislead you in a way to make you not immediately make the connection by the way they phrase a couple of things, but then you get like a sign and it's like, okay, I kind of know it. So, anyway, I'm curious to see how this progresses. I think it's an interesting start to the show. I'm not someone who watches a lot of just like traditional cop shows where we're solving cases week to week. But that's not necessarily what this is, though. This is kind of more of like a season-long plot, a couple of season-long plots in some ways. So, which is a bit more interesting to me than just case of the week type stuff. But anyway, I'll say spoilers then, so I can just get into it and talk about it a little bit more, and talk about anything else character-wise or scenes that I want to bring up. So I'll start with the hook. So I'll talk about the end of the episode, which is the reveal that all of the plot line with Merritt, the solicitor, is in the past. It's not concurrent with the other plot. And this was something that I just kind of like, it just occurred to me, look what they were doing, maybe like 30 seconds to a minute before they actually just revealed it. And I don't know if it was just as simple as when Akram's looking through the case files, he's got a box that says 2021, and I'm like, oh, 2021 would look more or less like just today still. Although arguably maybe there should be more mass and like, pandemic like things happening. Maybe there was some stuff in the background that I didn't notice, but it was just kind of like, because up until that point in the episode, the solicitor storyline felt so separate to everything else that was going on. Everything else all felt connected with Carl and what had happened to him and him being given Department Q, and the solicitor stuff felt super, super separate. And it was just kind of like, we're going to, and part of me actually thought that it was going to play out differently than it did. It still did something a little different to what I thought. What I thought was about to happen at the end of the episode was the reveal that, okay, this is the case they're going to work on, the cold case. And my assumption is that we weren't at that point in her story yet, is that she was going to keep having storylines each episode building up to when she was either eventually killed or kidnapped. And whereas it actually seems like, no, this part of the story where she's on the boat with her brother is the moment where she went missing. And we actually skip to where she is seemingly present day in the show and see that she is still alive, which also pays off the fact that Akram's like, no, I think she's still alive. The case is telling me, the case file tells me she's still alive. And Carl's a dick, right? That's the big thing about Carl. He's a pedantic prick who thinks he's the best and knows it all. And to be fair, he does call out colleagues on being sloppy, and he's like right about some of the things he's calling them out on, but he also just talks down to everyone, and he doesn't respect Akram. Akram deserves some damn respect. That's something that clearly I hope is an arc over the course of this. An Arkham for Akram. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. But he deserves some damn respect, and we actually see it, which maybe if I'm being really nitpicky, if I want to like super critique the ending, I'm like, I don't know if you needed the extra reveal. Now, admittedly, maybe they've got stuff they want to show with her, like in this tank that she's been held captive in, like next episode, so they have to show it now, and that's fair enough, I guess. But I almost felt like just the reveal of like she's went missing on the boat and this is going to be her case was a hook enough that I don't think we needed any more of it. But then they cut ahead to her in this tank. And interestingly, change aspect ratio. All of a sudden, when we go to this tank for the first time, we're in 4:3. So I would like to point out that when I say seemingly present day, I do mean seemingly. Like, I don't think anything confirms that this is in fact present day, but I'm going to assume it is until otherwise, but I'm leaving the door open to say, no, they could very well deceive us and say this is only a couple of months after she got taken, and she still might be dead in present day. But the way it's presented, it feels like they're at least wanting us to think, no, this is her in present day, she's still been held captive by someone. And who is that someone? It's hard to say, but it's someone who says, oh, justice is a filthy word coming out of your mouth, you don't deserve to be doing this. It's someone who feels very misogynistic and really hates her. Now, whether that's someone she's helped put away, someone she was maybe it's the guy in the episode, there's a sort of a murder trial for this man whose wife died by going down the stairs, and she's convinced that he did it. And as she's even presenting her case in her first big scene in court, it kind of feels like she's not doing it appropriately. And I'm saying this as someone who doesn't know how to, practice law, but it feels like she's just trying to convince the jury that what she believes. She's like, oh, we can all see that you did this. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily it almost feels a little too like opinion based, as opposed to like, here's the evidence that proves he did this. And the suspect, the accused, gives this rousing speech about how like he loved his wife and how he found her, and he didn't kill her either intentionally or otherwise. So and like she gets grilled by like her colleagues after the fact for kind of basically handing him the case, because she's convinced the jury are going to decide that he's guilty, but they're like, you have no idea what they're going to think when they go behind a closed door, and you can't assume that. You have to present them facts, you have to present them arguments that make sense, and all you were kind of doing was trying to say, hey, I'm convinced, therefore you should believe me. So you can sort of see where she's went wrong kind of in that scene. I think like it feels like she's like maybe letting her passion and her caring about putting him away getting in the way of actually convincing the jury of putting him away. So you can tell she cares, but you can also see how this dovetails into being harassed by assholes who want to shut her up or belittle her, and are sending menacing texts, and eventually send texts that kind of imply that they're watching her when she's not even just in court and in public. They mention that she gets drunk when she's looking at her laptop, and she gets worried that she's been watched. Later in the boat, it's like, hey, you can't hide, implying that they know she's not at home, she's not at a usual place. It's like she's trying to run away, and so on. So, I think the build up of that stuff is good for the most part. I think that you get the sense of like it's almost like the intimidation and the harassment start to overtake the case that she's just lost itself. But then the harassment keeps getting worse. And worth mentioning as well that she lives with her brother, who is mentally disabled, and has a carer. And interestingly, her and the carer have a very cold, borderline hostile relationship, where she's like not very happy with how the carer's talking to her brother, acting too motherly, that kind of thing. And it seems like the carer doesn't really think very highly of her, gives her a bit of a look when she starts drinking when she gets home, things like that. Feels like a very, hostile environment, not the nicest of situations that they're in. Now, whether or not either one of them are justified, or it's just kind of a combination of them both having their views and it kind of escalating to this really uncomfortable position, hard to say. But worth mentioning that. So, as a character witness goes, I suspect, we're going to see the characters speak to the brother, speak to this carer who was living there. Or not, she doesn't live there, she goes home, but she, she's there when the sister's at work. I suspect we'll be seeing all these characters, and maybe even her colleagues again, in the context of being questioned by Carl and whoever else from the present day part of the story. So all important details to set up. I like that kind of the night of style of seeing some of the, this isn't so much seeing the crime itself so much, but seeing a lot of like around the crime and the characters build up to it, and that may be helping, giving us clues for later that might help. Now, it's interesting, of course, that they've kept her alive. It wasn't about killing her, it was about keeping her prisoner for seemingly 4 or 5 years, which begs some questions as to why. But I do like the aspect ratio switching to 4:3 for the tank, because it's almost like she's enclosed, right? It's like the screen is literally getting tighter to make her feel claustrophobic. It's simple, but it's effective. And it was surprising because it was right at the end of the episode. I wasn't expecting it. I was very confused when I was like, wait, are those black bars all of a sudden? What's happening here? So, I love to talk about that stuff. I'm into it. And then all the Carl stuff, there's, like I say, maybe there's a couple of little bits where there's some stuff that drags. I actually, like the therapy scene early on, I thought was maybe going to be a bit of a dud, because it was kind of just going by the numbers of like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to the therapist about being shot. But I do think it got a little bit more interesting. It had some personality when she's like, oh, if you're fine then that's fine. And she just sort of like goes over to her desk and starts eating her lunch because, well, you're fine. You don't need therapy. We might as well just sit here and I'll eat my lunch. I actually kind of liked that, which made him frustrated. It was almost a little bit hypocritical where he was like, we don't need to do this. But then the second she stops paying attention to him, it was basically, she's using, I won't call it reverse psychology. I mean, I guess it kind of is, but It feels like she's using some tactics to get under his skin, so he'll open up a little bit and talk about what's happened, and he's got a lot to talk about. Like I said, that opening sequence, which is all presented from the body camera of the police officer that found the body. Because the show starts with them finding this dead body, and it's Carl and his, I guess, partner, who I think is named James Hardy. If I'm assuming that's who this is anyway. He's got long hair in this photograph, which has thrown me off a little bit. But they're just like investigating the crime scene, and Carl is just such a dick to this rookie cop who he just keeps like grilling for like, oh, have you not checked the windows? Go do this if you want to be useful. Stop, vomiting and tell me that it smells bad. We can tell. Like, he's a complete dick to him, which makes him feel guilty later, actually, because this guy dies. Like, he gets killed. But it's a very surprising opening because, obviously we're starting off with like a murder scene, right? And there's like a knife in this old man's head, and they're talking about it, they're questioning it. And as soon as the PC, the regular cop, walks off to, go check the windows, out of nowhere, this man in a balaclava just pops out and shoots him. So it's a very surprising end to the scene. Like, I didn't see it coming. It helped that I didn't look up anything. Because if I'd read the premise was, injured in the line of duty or something, I would have maybe predicted something like this happening. But it was so out of nowhere, not knowing it was coming, that it kind of was a jolt where I was like, oh, okay, that actually surprised me. What's going on here? Was this a trap to lure, the inspectors in to shoot them? Or was it something else? Did they just sort of feel like doing this because they were waiting around at their crime scene until someone showed up? I mean, we know it's been at least a few days since this old guy died. It was a rough estimate, but yeah, it wasn't like just an hour ago. So someone's been staking this place out. And there's some details later on where Carl grills some of the people at the station for not like checking like the local McDonald's like security cameras, because there's like McDonald's like wrappers and stuff under the car that drove off from the killer and stuff like that. But so he wants to work on the case, and obviously his boss tells him that he cannot work on his own shooting. That's not how it works, and that makes sense. And it's like, what is he going to do? And it's not until she gets told that she has to open this department queue that she enlists him for that, which basically she agrees to because they say it'll have its own budget and she gets to do whatever she wants with that budget. So basically what she does is she puts Carl in the basement with no resources and takes all the money for that department and just puts it into the main part of the station. They're all getting new computers, they're getting new TVs, they're getting all sorts of stuff. It's actually a little bit funny when she's like getting all these things delivered. It feels a little bit like, I don't know why I call it corruption per se, but there's some creative accounting going on here. And it's not until Carl kind of like jokingly threatens, hey, like maybe we'll run this up the chain and see how you're spending this money, that she's like, okay, fine, I'll give you like someone to help you. And maybe like, a laptop with some internet access. But yeah, which is actually how Akram gets into it, because Akram is wanting a job. He's told that there's nothing available, but when Carl demands an assistant, all of a sudden Akram's sent down. So it's like, okay, you got a job. And if, again, Carl treats him like shit, expects him to mop the floor, tells him to go get stuff, that kind of thing. But Akram starts looking at the files and he's like, hey, some of these can be solved. And says that he helped solve cases in Syria. And he's like, well, you were a policeman in Syria? He's like, kind of. So I'm sure we'll find out a bit more what that kind of means and how he was involved with this sort of stuff without maybe officially being a part of a police force. But I think that, it's an interesting setup. He's instantly quite likable. Even the little scene he has with Rosie, the other woman who works in the station, who was letting him in because he was giving her treats that his wife made. She has a little bit of attitude. She comes down and says a couple things. But the scene that she shares with him, where she's like really apologetic that he isn't getting a job, and she feels quite bad that she has to kick him out. It makes you feel kind of bad for him. He seems like a nice guy, which is a good foil for our main character, who is the dickhead cop, right? Obviously, he wants to solve cases, but he's an asshole about it. So you can kind of get on board with what his intentions are, even though you can kind of like, no, don't be an asshole to everyone around you. They're nicer people. Even when he's right, which sometimes he is. Although I think with Akram might actually be right and deserves a little bit more attention paid to by Carl. So, and then the other part of this is that Carl's partner didn't die, right? The rookie cop did. His partner, though, is paralyzed. And he's in hospital. And we see him go to visit his partner. We see also him like watch the the body camera footage from the incident. And that's when he gets guilty looking at photos of the young police officer and all that stuff. But he goes to visit his partner, and his partner just doesn't talk that first scene. He just lies there, doesn't engage, doesn't take the drink that he's offered, just stares at the TV, not caring. There's a scene where, on the way to the crime scene, we get a little flashback where they were arguing about football. They're arguing about the World Cup from the 1966, I like to say, because that's where England won, and people like bringing that up. But they bond over football, and they're trying to, like, Carl's trying to like bring it up, and they're trying to watch it in the hospital, and he's just lying there, not caring anymore. Which interestingly is how I react to someone putting football, even when I'm fit and healthy. But he did care about it. He's lost his luster for it, and later on when he goes back to see him, and he's called back to see him because James seemingly had fallen out of his bed and was near the window, which immediately made me think he was trying to kill himself. And it's confirmed very quickly, when Carl's kind of like bringing this up. And obviously, he's a detective. He looks at crime scenes for a living. He figures things out. So he's not really saying it, but he's just kind of saying, oh, you were over by the window. Funny that. And James, the first thing he says, outside of the opening scene in the flashbacks to before he was hurt, is just please. But, please help me. As if, he wants to die and he wants his friend to help him die. And it's really sad, but at the within seconds, James's wife and children come in, and arguably the best moment of like acting in the show is this little moment here where James like has to sort of like force a slightly happy face for his family. He doesn't want his kids to like see him looking, well, like he wants to kill himself. So it's a good little moment, I think, that sells it. And it does kind of come back round by the end, where the next time Carl goes to see him, and Carl's kind of struggling and saying, hey, I'm just going to like put in my days until I can quit, and that'll be the end of it. And like, if it wasn't for my teenage son and you, like, what the hell else would I be trying to stick it out for? And it's almost like by showing that he is also struggling, and then maybe he would even be like in a dark place if it wasn't for one or two people who needed him, that maybe he would just be in as much a bad mental space as James is. And it's almost like James recognizes that, and recognizes that maybe he should also be there for Carl, and says, tell me about this new department. Now, I'm sure he's going to end up helping in some way, right? Because he's still got his mind. He can still do stuff from an investigative point of view. But right now, it felt like a character moment. It felt like a moment of, oh, tell me about this. I'll show an interest, and maybe it'll, by helping you, it's giving me a purpose kind of thing. Aside from his wife and kids, which I'm assuming is also on his mind, but they're barely characters in this. They just kind of pop in for that one scene. So it felt like an important little character beat. I wasn't expecting because the first time we went to see James at the hospital, I was kind of thinking, okay, this makes sense, but I'm not necessarily that engaged with who his partner is yet. And I think the performance when the family showed up after he'd been asking for help was a really good little moment. And then him coming back round to want to help Carl, realizing that Carl's a bit of a dick who needs him there to kind of, almost like maybe he balanced Carl out before. Like, Carl's always been a dick, but his partner James would always be the good cop there to kind of like toe him in a little bit, stick up for other people around him. And he realizes that Carl still needs him in some capacity here, even if he feels like he might feel useless right now because he's lying in a hospital bed, but ultimately, no, he still has purpose. He still has things that he can contribute. I thought that actually worked out nicely by the end as well. Obviously we've set up this basement department where they're going to like try and solve unsolved cases, and I suspect the main case of the season is going to be Merritt. Maybe they'll do a couple of quick easy ones along the way until Akram can convince Carl that this one's worth doing, because Carl writes her off. He's like, nah, she's dead, it's been 4 years, she's gone. And Akram's like, I don't think so. The case doesn't tell me that. And then we, the audience, seemingly see her alive. So Akram's right, and Carl needs to realize that it's not worth giving up. And that kind of feeds into the whole theme of his character right now, is that he's ready to give up. He wants to quit the Force. His partner was ready to go out the window. No, don't give up on yourself, because there's people out there that you shouldn't give up on either. And you can save them. And, you know, a big part of this character arc, I would imagine, is Carl finding that he is actually able to achieve something and save someone in a way that will give him purpose again, right? Because right now, it doesn't feel like he has that purpose. He's just a dick who's depressed and guilty, and, you know, maybe feels kind of weak because he was ambushed in the way that he was. But yeah, so pretty solid first episode, right? It's got a hook at the end. It sets up some pretty decent character stuff. Admittedly, I think Akram, and even to an extent James, are a bit more interesting right now than Carl himself is. Carl's almost a foil for the characters around him because he is such a dick, but you can kind of see where the character arc's going to come from. And it mightn't be a big deal when he, like, gives in a lot. There's even a little moment in this where he's telling Akram not to look at the files, and then he kind of, like, changes his mind and says, oh, look, why don't we just say you can organize them? You can do administrative work, because you're technically not supposed to be doing police work, per se. And it feels like he's given an inch there a little bit. Like, he's already starting to soften a touch. But we'll see how that plays out over the course of the whole story, right? Apparently this has been renewed for a season 2. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that it goes. Anyway, that's my thoughts on episode 1 of Department Q. Pretty good. Like, I think it had a little bit more wit and a little bit more personality than I think I was expecting it to, and some genuinely good little moments sprinkled throughout that felt like it was elevating the material otherwise. Like, I think that the baseline premise is all right. Like, it's not nothing that special. Oh, you know, police officer, detective gets new department to go and solve cases. That's not that new or original. But it's got a couple of little character beats, a couple of little hooks to make it feel just a little bit more fleshed out and have a little bit more going for it than that. So I'm looking forward to Akram being the hero of this story and saving the day. And that should be fun times. So yeah, let me know what you thought of episode 1 of Department Q in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. All of that support does greatly help and keep everything coming. Check out the Mail Fuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. But that is me, so thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?